Welcome back to the Tom Anderson Show, the best company on your morning drive in Alaska on KVNT 1020 AM and 92.5 FM. Online at tomandersonshow.com, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Alaska time. Want to join us? Call 907-357-5868. That's 357-5868. Good morning, America. Here's Tom Anderson.
Everybody, we're back. Tom Anderson Show. You can find us at tomandersonshow.com. We're going to sprinkle on a little Newt Gingrich, then we're going to get to Pat Buchanan.
Saw a situation with everything he just saw in Houston, now looking at what's coming in Florida, and I think his feeling was, we got to get some movement in Washington. We spent 8 months and we didn't get big things done.
There you go, and we didn't. And Pat Buchanan, it's certainly a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you this morning?
Morning. Good. I'm fine, Tom. How are you?
I am great. I'm looking. I did a little research, and I remember fondly, I was elated because Wayne Anthony Ross, my employer at the time and good friend, I was in law school in Minneapolis, and I was back, and it was 1996, and lo and behold, victory in Alaska straw poll boosts Pat Buchanan. And I was reading an article about that, reminiscing, and boy, those were the days. I bet a lot of people wish you would have won, and maybe we'd be in a different circumstance in our nation. But a lot of things happening right now, and I really appreciated your townhall.com article. In fact, I'm posting it on the Tom Anderson Show Facebook page. What do you think about this? It sounds like you concur with Newt Gingrich on the debt ceiling.
I do. I concur in this sense. I think what happened is that Donald Trump, the president, is a can-do guy. He's not a talker. He's a doer, and he's worked with the Congress for 7 months. They produce nothing, and they're arguing over a debt ceiling. And he finally says, look, if the Republicans can't get together and get something on my desk, I'm going to have to go work with the work with the Democrats, with Pelosi and Schumer, because I intend to get things done whether the Republicans can do them or not. So I agree, and I think the nation applauded the fact they want some funds going down to Houston to help those folks out. They want this debt ceiling dealt with and not have to go to the edge of default every year. So I think the message, Tom, is really to the Republicans. Look, if you get your act together and you can vote and send stuff down to Donald Trump that you've worked up on the Hill with Republicans alone, he'll work with you. But if you can't do that, he's going to work with Democrats.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we have our own problem here with U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan and U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski, both friends of mine, and I have no doubt you have known them or met them as well on the Hill, and we're looking at who sides with who, and I don't think Lisa Murkowski really is a fan of Trump. I can't speak for her, but I know Dan Sullivan is trying to work with him. You go state by state, not just with the two U.S. Senate pairings in each, but then with Congress. And I have a few friends that are congressmen. I bet you have hundreds of friends that are congressional leaders, and it's frustrating. I don't know if we can come together or not. I think your article was apropos, and you look at the weather and the hurricanes. Do you think something could be done more than what the federal government's doing now, or is it one of these sit back and waits and let the governors of the Abbott and Scott deal with this first?
My feeling is that we've had so much experience with this. You had Andrew down in Florida, and you've had Katrina, and then you had Sandy up in the Jersey coast, that we find out after these hurricanes go through that there are different things we should have done and we shouldn't have done, and you can never be sure. I mean, the call to evacuate from Florida and the Keys is apparently the largest movement in peacetime of people almost in history. So I've got a lot of confidence here, but I do think you've got to wait and see where it hits and where the problems occur. But I think from everything everyone says, despite the horrendous problems in Houston, all folks at the local, state, and federal level seem to be doing well. We haven't had the same kind of reaction that they did to Bush's behavior in Katrina. But I think they're all doing well, Tom, and so we got a hellish situation coming in Florida unless this hurricane hits Cuba and veers off there, which would reduce its strength. I mean, that wouldn't be good for the Cuban people. But I think we're just going to have to wait and see now. My guess is everybody's done everything, and now we're going to have to wait.
We're talking with Pat Buchanan. Of course, he's been an advisor and a statesman and one of the most prominent at the pinnacle in America, certainly in American history of the last 100 years. And whether it be with Nixon or with Ford or with Bush and Reagan, I think of most particularly, you've watched transitions and administrations and cabinets come and go. With Trump's cabinet, I hate to get into some of the nitty-gritty here, but you can from afar kind of assess it. We see Steve Bannon leave, goes back to Breitbart. We had scheduled a day, and we've had to move him to next week. Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who pops in and then leaves. You see Reince Priebus come in with all the glory and gone. Some of the other ones less notable. But do you think this is a typical administration and purging, or do you think this is unique and perhaps negative under the Trump administration?
Well, let me compare it with what we did with Nixon in 68, 69. The campaign staff that had gone with Nixon through the 66 campaign in 68 and had basically run the campaign, the national end of it, and also traveling with the president. Many of us came into the White House and were given positions, but a new group was brought into the cabinet and the senior White House staff in some cases, Henry Kissinger and Pat Moynihan, for example. And eventually sort of many of the political people who had been with the president and brought him in had moved on out by the end of the first year. But what's happened in the Trump White House is much more of an overall purging, I think, a removal. I mean, you mentioned yourself, you had the first chief of staff, you've got Bannon, you had Spicer, you've got, Reince Priebus, again, the chief of staff, and you've had Flynn. So you've really had a massive turnover of top key White House staff, and others still may be going. So this is much more dramatic, and I think it's a function of the fact that the president has never been in government before, and he's not familiar with a lot of names, and a lot of the folks that came in with him were real outsiders. My concern here has been that it's been, obviously you'd expect it to be slow to fill up the administration with personnel, but it's been awfully slow, and there's not a lot of prominent positions filled. And once again, partly this is a result of a certain torpor in the U.S. Senate and the confirmation process, and the fact that these folks just don't seem to work as hard as we used to in the old days. I mean, in the White House, you'd work 70 hours a week or something, and the Congress, you're off on a 5-week vacation, and then you learn that in September they'll be meeting 12 days. So you wonder what's going on.
Well, you look at a Gingrich and a Bob Dole pairing, and you clean Bob Dole's clock up here in Alaska. But, I mean, I know you're friends with all these folks. And the Gingrich pairing and Dole versus a Ryan and a McConnell, I mean, would you say there's a stark difference in power and ingenuity, or would you say it's just a different time and they all have their aptitude?
Well, I think that I will give Gingrich credit in the mid-'90s and the Republican Senate, working with Clinton. But they had in Bill Clinton someone who recognized that the country had taken a sudden turn at the congressional level to the right, and he worked with him on balanced budgets and welfare reform. So I think they had some success there. The problem with, which I don't understand, is why the Republicans, why the Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell can't sit his guys down and say, look, the question is a simple one. Are we going to write the laws and have them send them down the hill, send them down the street to the president to sign? Because if we can't do it ourselves with our majorities, he's going to bring in some Democrats and drop some of us off, and he's going to work with them. And I think that is the message that came through with this debt ceiling vote, which contained the Houston bailout money. So I think Trump has really, if you will, set the cat down among the pigeons. And if the conservatives and the Republicans don't get together on dealing with the DACA, the Dreamers issue, or tax reform, or the infrastructure, or health care, I think Trump will not hesitate to work out deals with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer.
And is that sacrilege? We're talking with Pat Buchanan. Do you think that's a deal breaker? Or do you think that's what you have to do to get the job done?
I think that's reality in this sense. Donald Trump is an impatient man. He's a doer, not really a talker. He builds things. He gets the job done ahead of schedule. And to sit in the White House Oval Office for 7 or 8 months and have nothing really major come down because the Republicans can't pull it all together. He said, look, if they can't do it, I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah, that's
it's a very natural human instinct, and I would prefer that the Republicans work with Trump, but I understand him. I'm going to disagree probably. If you mean you got to make a deal with Schumer and Pelosi, you're going to have to give up something I wouldn't like to give up. But you got to ask you who's responsible if you couldn't get together and Trump has to go to Schumer.
Absolutely. Pat Buchanan, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I hope you enjoy your weekend. Thank you for your time. It's the Tom Anderson Show. Good morning.